What's up, designers, and welcome back to Rempton Games. I want to start out by apologizing for not uploading recently. I am finishing my master's degree this semester, and I've just been really busy these last few weeks finishing up my project and report, as well as looking for jobs after I graduate. I'm going to try to stick to a regular upload schedule for the foreseeable future, but the future is still very uncertain right now, so I'll let you know more when I know more. With that out of the way, let's talk about the reason you clicked on this video: Monopoly. I would describe Monopoly as the McDonald's of board games. It's not the best option out there, but it's easy, it's always available, everyone knows it, and for no other reasons because this is a totally original analogy. Monopoly isn't a great game, but its ubiquity is its strength. For me personally, I often play Monopoly around this time of year because when not undergoing a minor apocalypse, the holidays are a great time to get together with family and subsequently break apart those families with tabletop game-based rage so that nobody wants to see each other for another year. And if you have to play Monopoly with your family, you might as well use your unrivaled knowledge of statistics and strategy to utterly humiliate and defeat them, right? That's where I come in. In this video, I'm going to show you how to absolutely always, for certain, definitely 100% beat your friends and family in the game of Monopoly. Or not, because this is still a game with a huge amount of randomness, and even if you make the best choices you can, there's still a chance of somebody else just getting luckier, but at least you can boost your odds as much as possible, right? Without further ado, let's get started. The first choice you have to make when starting a game of Monopoly is deciding which piece you're going to play. This is an incredibly important decision that can shape the entire outcome of the game. The obvious top tier options are the dog, top hat, and, if you have a more recent version of the game, the T-Rex. I'm the T-Rex! Moving on. In the beginning of the game, the key is to be as aggressive as possible with buying properties. True, not every property is made equal, but in the early stages of the game you want to get as much property as you can without being picky. As the game goes on and you start to upgrade your properties, you can be a bit more choosy about which properties you upgrade and when, but even less valuable properties can still be useful as leverage or bargaining chips. Also, early in the game, nobody has a monopoly, so there's not really any reason to keep a lot of cash on hand since the rents for undeveloped properties are so low. Finally, undeveloped properties are a terrible investment, and the only way to really start making money off of them is to get a monopoly and develop as soon as possible. And buying up as much property as you can is going to help with this. Now let's move on to the middle stage of the game, where most of the properties have been bought and people are starting to gather and develop their monopolies. Here is where an in-depth knowledge of the Monopoly board will come in handy. For this section, I'm going to be heavily referencing a classic webpage by Truman Collins, who simulated millions of Monopoly rolls to get statistics on the game. These include how likely you are to land on each space and how much income each investment will bring in. I'll be covering most of the main points, but if you want to check it out, I'll leave a link in the description. The first and most important thing to realize is that not every square in Monopoly is made equal. You may think that because you're rolling dice, you have an equal chance of landing on any given square, but this is ignoring things like chance and community chest cards, the go to jail space, or rolling 3 doubles in a row sending you to jail. When you take these factors into account, the story is very different. The most landed on square is jail. Even if you choose to get out of jail as quickly as possible, you still have a 6.2% chance of ending your turn on this space. This, in turn, raises the probability of landing on spaces that can be easily reached from jail, specifically the orange and red monopolies. In fact, spaces on the two sides between jail and go to jail tend to have much higher odds in general, whereas spaces on the other two sides tend to rank lower. Specifically, the two spaces in the brown, formerly purple monopoly, Baltic and Mediterranean avenues are the least likely properties for you to land on, closely followed by Park Place. The most landed on individual property is Illinois Avenue, a red space, whereas the most landed on Monopoly is the orange Monopoly. However, understanding the board isn't just about knowing the odds. It's also about understanding the income potential of each space. A property's income potential depends on a number of factors, including how much it costs to buy, how much it costs to upgrade, and how much rent you can bring in at each stage of development. Understanding which properties to develop, how far to develop, and when will be key to winning this middle stage of the game. Here are some general guidelines for development. First, if you have to choose between buying new properties or developing your existing properties, always choose to build. Undeveloped properties simply don't bring in enough income to justify the cost, and you should always choose to develop as quickly as possible. Let's show this with a real example. The brown monopoly, Baltic and Mediterranean, and the dark blue monopoly, Park Place and Boardwalk, both consist of 2 properties each. However, the brown monopoly is the cheapest in the game and has the lowest rents, while the dark blue monopoly is the most expensive and has the highest rent. Just buying the dark blue monopoly costs $750 before you even start developing. This can bring about $70 to $100 in rent, which is about $3.8 on average per roll. On the other hand, you can buy both brown properties and upgrade them all the way to hotels, and it'll only cost you $620. This will bring in a rent between $250 and $450, which averages out to about $14 per roll. This shows just how powerful developing your property can really be. In fact, developing your properties is so important that it's even worth mortgaging your other properties in order to do so. Yes, you'll lose some income from those mortgaged properties, but the higher rents from developing more than makes up for it. Because of this, as soon as you get a monopoly, you should generally mortgage all of your other properties to start developing it. We now know the value of developing properties, but this doesn't tell us which properties to develop. Suppose, for instance, that you have 2 partially completed monopolies and want to make a trade to complete one of them. Or maybe you already have 2 monopolies, but want to know which to develop and which to mortgage. Your instinct may be to go for the more expensive monopoly, but this isn't always the best choice. What we really should be looking at is efficiency and return on investment, not just how high the rents are. Return on investment depends on the earning potential of the property in relation to its cost. To demonstrate this, let's look at the orange monopoly versus the green monopoly. Fully upgrading the orange monopoly will cost $2,060 and will bring in a maximum rent of $1,000. Fully upgrading the green monopoly, on the other hand, will cost $3,920 and will only bring in a maximum rent of $1,400. The total cost of upgrading the green monopoly is 90% higher, but only brings in a 40% higher rent. Clearly, the orange monopoly is a more efficient investment. In fact, taking the odds of landing on each square into account, the orange monopoly is the most efficient investment in the game, followed closely by the light blue monopoly, the red monopoly, and the rest, as you can see on screen, with the utilities in dead last. Those things are seriously the worst. Now that we've looked at which monopolies to upgrade, let's take a look at how. While it may be tempting to upgrade to hotels as quickly as possible, this should be avoided for 2 reasons. The first reason is efficiency. As we talked about earlier, higher rent doesn't always mean better, and it turns out that the most efficient use of your money is actually to upgrade to 3 houses. The first 3 houses result in huge increases in rent, whereas the 4th house and hotel are usually much more incremental increases. For example, let's look at Illinois Avenue. Upgrading from 1 house to 2 is a 200% increase, and upgrading from 2 to 3 houses is a 150% increase. But going from 3 houses to 4 is only a 23% increase, and upgrading to a hotel is even worse. For this reason, you should try to get all of your properties to 3 houses before springing for hotels. Another reason to stick with houses rather than hotels is to cause a housing shortage. Monopoly traditionally comes with 32 houses and 12 hotels. Once those are gone, nobody else can build. If you can take up all, or even just most of the houses, this can severely hinder your opponent's abilities to upgrade their properties. Finally, let's look at when to upgrade your properties. While I've been saying up to this point that you should upgrade as soon as possible, and this is mostly true, you should always keep in mind where everybody is on the board. If none of your opponents are in range to land on your properties, then it might be better to hold off on upgrading them until there's a better chance of them actually being landed on, especially if there's a chance that you might land on one of your opponent's upgraded properties. In addition, while the rules for efficiency I've been talking about hold true most of the time, don't be afraid to make bold moves. If upgrading a space to a hotel would guarantee that you knock out one of your opponents if they land on it, that might be a better move, even if it's not the most efficient use of your money. Now that we have a better understanding of the board, there's a few other strategic points that are worth discussing. The first of these is jail. Your strategy for how you handle jail should evolve throughout the game. Early on, when you're still picking up properties, you want to get out of jail as quickly as possible, because staying in jail can reduce your momentum and result in fewer opportunities to pick up new properties. The only possible exception is if you need St. James Place or Tennessee Avenue to complete a monopoly. Staying in jail and rolling doubles to get out can actually increase your odds of landing on these two spaces by about 25%. Later in the game is a different story. Once you and your opponents have both developed some properties, you'll probably want to spend as much time in jail as possible. This is because you're still allowed to buy and sell properties, receive rents, buy houses, and even participate in auctions while you're in jail according to the official rules. Although some families have house rules saying that you're not allowed to. However, if playing by the normal rules, it can be incredibly advantageous to stay in jail. You have no risk of landing on your opponent's properties, but they can still land on yours. Basically, you can just sit back and watch the money roll in. Since I brought up house rules, let's talk about those. The no business in jail rule is just one of many house rules that people add to Monopoly, and the number of games that I've personally played with house rules far exceeds the number without. Some of these house rules are pretty innocuous, such as the rule that you get $400 if you land directly on go instead of just passing by it. However, others can hurt the game significantly. The two common house rules that I want to address are free parking rules and not using auctions. According to the official Monopoly rules, free parking does nothing. It's literally just a free place to park. However, there are a number of different house rules that give free parking an additional function, usually giving money to the person who lands there. The version that I've played with most often says that whenever you pay taxes or a fee according to a community chest or a chance card, that money goes in the middle of the board. Then, whenever somebody lands on free parking, they get to collect all of the money that's in the middle. I understand the appeal of this rule. It gives people hope when they're behind that they might land on free parking and come back, and it's always an exciting moment when somebody does land on it. With that being said, I'm not a huge fan of this rule. If you've ever wondered why Monopoly takes so long to play, this house rule is a big part of the reason why. Players randomly receiving large influxes of cash does nothing but prolong the game. It also introduces another element of luck to an already very random game. I would recommend playing without this rule. You might be surprised how quickly it can go. Another common rule is playing without auctions. This is so common that some of you watching may not even realize that Monopoly has auctions, but it does. According to the official rules, if somebody lands on a property and chooses not to buy it, then that property goes up for auction, and anyone can bid on it, including the person who chose not to buy it in the first place. This rule actually opens up a lot of possibilities. You can choose not to buy properties in the hopes that you can pick them up cheaper during auction. You can bid up an opponent to make them pay more for a property that you know they need. And it even gives you more opportunities to pick up the properties that you need to complete your monopolies. Auctions are a surprisingly deep mechanic. So deep, in fact, that auction games have become their own genre that will probably get their own dedicated video at some point. For this reason, I can see why many people choose not to use auctions in Monopoly. They slow down the game and add an additional layer of complexity that not all players may desire, especially if you're playing with kids. For this one, I'll say whether to use auctions or not really depends on who you're playing with, and I'll leave that judgment up to you. The final aspect of Monopoly that I haven't really touched on is the social aspect. Trading and making deals with other players is a huge part of the game, but it's also the hardest to quantify. It really comes down to knowing the other players at the table. Some players might overvalue Boardwalk and Park Place, so you might be able to get a really good trade for them. Other players might not realize how garbage the utilities are and might take them off your hands for more than they're worth. Having a good understanding of the board and the value of each Monopoly can help you make good trades and keep you from getting ripped off. My one piece of advice is to try and be nice. I've seen players denied trades on more than one occasion, not because it was a bad trade, but just because that player had a bad reputation. If done right, a trade can make everyone better off, and if you develop a reputation for making good trades, then other players are going to be more likely to want to make deals with you. That's all I have for this week. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I apologize once again for the delay. If you want to see more, check out my other videos, like my previous entry in my Evolution of Pokemon Design series. I also have over 100 articles on the Rempton Games blog, which you can check out at the link in the description down below. And join me next time for the History of Game Design video that I promised you last time. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.